Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. That is, peace be unto you. It is my pleasure and honor to be able to address this listening audience with what we consider a very powerful message, a message of hope, a message of peace, a message of forgiveness, a message of freedom, and a message of liberation. We thank Almighty Allah for this blessed month of Ramadan. This month is a message of first forgiveness, then the mercy of Allah, and then the blessing of Allah. We believe that we are in a time, a very special time, when Allah will bestow a great blessing on the people who were taken from their land, from Africa, brought here to America to be made slaves, a people who have endured slavery, suffering, and death, a people who have suffered immensely for over 400 years. And now this is the time when the mercy and the blessings of Allah will descend on those people. We are in the time of the rise of the common people to live freely and serve the will of God. Islam is a way of life that gives freedom, justice, and equality to the common person. When Islam came into the world in the 7th century via Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of God forever be upon the Prophet, it came to the people unexpectedly. It came to the people as something strange. It came to the people as a faith that sought to raise the common person and liberate the common person. And the people were astonished. The people were amazed. They didn't expect what was coming, and they didn't understand why Islam had to come. But Islam came to a people that were oppressed in the land. They were exploited by corrupt leaders, corrupt kings and emperors. The masses of the people were under grave exploitation. So Islam came to free and liberate them. Moreover, it came to topple and overturn the priestly order of the religious class so that they can come into freedom, justice, and equality. And as it came to the people in the 7th century, we are looking at some marvelous things that will happen with God's permission in the 21st century. That God, the Almighty, intends to raise the common people, free them from the clutches of imperialism, freedom from the clutches of domination, so that they can reach the fullness of their human capacity. It is Allah's plan that He raise the exploited masses just as Allah raised the prophets and messengers. So Allah sent a succession of prophets and messengers to the people of the earth, bringing guidance and light, as the Quran mentions. And then, as Allah began sending prophets and messengers, He sent His last prophet, Muhammad, may the peace and the blessings of Allah forever be upon the prophet, as the seal of the prophets. Now, why did He send Muhammad as the seal of the prophets? Why is it that He's not going to send any other prophets and messengers? The reason why the prophets began and the prophets will come to an end is because the work and the mission of the prophets would have been fulfilled when the people rise. When we see a raising of the people, just as God raised the prophets among them. And that is the day and time that we're in today. And so we have been committed to building a community, building the Ummah, as we say in Arabic, for the unity of all of the believers across the United States of America, so that we can establish our identity as an Islamic people here in the United States of America and follow and demonstrate the human capacity that God has given us for the benefit of advancing human society. And so we are committed to building the Ummah, bringing all of our brothers and sisters together as a common human society so that we can make progress for the people. Now, I have a brother who is with us today, and at this time I would ask if he would like to ask any questions.
Yeah, Muhammad, what is Islam? Like, what does it mean? A lot of people think Islam is some sort of hierarchy of a patriarch, something like that. It's just something that's evil. Can you elaborate on what it actually is?
Yes, Islam is not evil at all. Islam is actually excellent and good. Islam comes from the root in Arabic, salama, which means peace or wholeness. Once we become whole, we automatically and instantaneously come into peace. So Islam is all about the peace. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he explained what coming into Islam actually means, and he said that Islam is based on 5 pillars, 5 liberating pillars. The first pillar is to acknowledge that God is one God and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Pillar number 2 is salat. The individual establishes salat freely without any compunction or compulsion for himself. The third pillar is the giving of charity in all forms. The 4th pillar is fasting during the month of Ramadan, which we are in right now. And the 5th pillar is performing the Hajj to Mecca if and when we can afford it. So that is the basic structure for the liberation and freedom of the individual to exercise the fullness of their faith without a religious hierarchy over the individual. Islam came to eliminate a religious hierarchy, a priesthood, if you will, over the individual so that the individual could come into peace, freedom, justice, and equality on their own with their creator who created them.
Okay. A lot of people also think that a Muslim has to wear a certain type of attire, like so you can identify someone as a Muslim. A lot of people also think Muslims are mainly Arab people. Can you elaborate on that as well?
Yes, in terms of attire, uh, there are Muslims all over the world, and in every country, every nation, among every people, they have their own style, their own attire. So there's no particular attire for Muslims. Muslims can wear any attire that they choose. The only condition is that that attire with which they wear is modest. It respects their sense of modesty.
Okay. A couple more things. A lot of people also think that when you speak of Islam, it oppresses women. That women are oppressed and they're not free to do a lot of things. They have to be subservient to their husband, and the reason they cover themselves up is because of their husband's insecurities. What do you think about this?
Right. As I mentioned, Islam came to liberate and free men and women. Women are not subservient to their husbands. Men do not oppress their wives. We have a certain semblance of freedom. Men and women respect one another. Allah does make the men responsible for all of the affairs of the household. But responsibility does not mean dominance. Responsibility means responsibility. So the men in Islam has responsibility. Allah says, "Irrijalun kawamuna ala nisa'in bima fadlallahu ba'dahum ala ba'd." And that means that the men are the responsible ones over the affairs of the women, because Allah has put one in a position more than the other to assume that particular responsibility, and because men provide for the women through their means, through their livelihood, and that's as a general principle. There are certain situations where women are actually the providers, but as a general principle, women receive support and assistance from their husbands as a general rule. And that general rule still holds in the 21st century. So there is mutual cooperation, there's love and mercy between men and women. And so there's no dominance and subservience.
Okay. I guess about two more things. Another thing is, in certain countries that are an Islamic state, you'll see that there will be men that actually do certain things that would be ungodly, immoral things among men and women and children. So why is it that when we see these radical terrorist people, that they're commonly associated with Islam and they're not associated with these other religions?
Right, the terrorism that we see is a direct result of colonialism by the Europeans and the destruction and decimation of the Islamic spirit and the oppression of the Western world over the Islamic populations. And so we see the result of the evil and cruel effects of oppression and colonization over the Islamic world. Islam inherently is a way of peace, and it will again be the way of peace. The radical elements in the Islamic world, these elements will be short-lived. The way of peace will be established throughout the world. And here in the United States of America in particular, we're going to see some marvelous achievements and accomplishments of the people whom Allah will raise to be able to live out the peace and the freedom and the justice and the equality that Islam calls for. We're going to see an end to destruction. We're going to see an end to radicalization. We're going to see an end to the decimation of Islamic towns and cities, and we're going to see a restoration of peace and freedom coming to the world by virtue of Islam being properly understood and properly lived.
Wow, it's amazing. One last thing. We're talking about Islam and other religions. Is there some sort of rule that says that Islam is better than any other religion, and why is it that you don't see them really associate themselves with Christians and Jews? Is there a hate factor, basically?
Yes, one of the things we learn in Islam is that we don't place the prophets of Islam, the prophet of Islam, as someone who is higher or better than the other prophets. We make no distinction between any of the prophets or messengers that came to the Jewish people or that came to the people we now call Christians. We make no distinction between Moses or Jesus, or between Noah or Abraham and Muhammad. All of the prophets are sent by God, and we're not qualified to make any distinction. So we don't see Islam as higher or better. We see Islam as good and Islam as excellent. And all of the prophets and messengers, as we understand it, brought Islam. There's only one way of life that they brought, and Islam means peace. Islam means submission to the will of God, serving the will of God. And so the only faith that God brought to the world is to serve Him. And in Arabic, serving God is called Islam in the Arabic language. So all of the prophets brought Islam, and as a result, all of the prophets were Muslim. Muslim means one who carries out the service of God. And so all of the prophets carried out the service of God, so they were all Muslim. And so there is no distinction between any of the prophets' works. All of their works were excellent and good. And we intend to do a lot of work with Jewish and Christian brothers as Muslims to repair some of the blight and the ills of our community and society, so that we can raise the consciousness of all people of faith to address the critical issues that we face as a people in human society, and human society will be the better for it with all of us working together. We don't believe that we can do it alone. We need good Christians, we need good Jewish people to aid and assist in the restoration of our society so that we can make the progress that God would be pleased with. And so, brothers and sisters, we thank you for this opportunity. This is a first for us, but it will be one of many opportunities that we intend to come before you to bring a dynamic message of unity, a dynamic message of peace, a dynamic message of hope, a dynamic message of prosperity. And God intends to establish us in the land, in this land, the United States of America, where we are right now, since we've been cut off from our roots in Africa. And we welcome all people to join us. We're not racist as Muslims. We embrace all people of goodwill to join us in this effort of unity, prosperity, brotherhood, and peace. So I greet you in peace in the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum.